So the other day, I was getting some stuff done around the house, and as I was doing it, all of a sudden, I kept thinking about old stuff, like old things that used to get on my nerves. You know, how the kids did this, or husband did this, or I did this, or this hasn't happened. All of these thoughts. And I was like, hold on. Those are not my thoughts. That is not what I believe. That is not my portion. So whose thoughts are these? They're not mine. They were the enemy's. You see, the enemy came in trying to find a way to step in. And you see, when the enemy comes in and he tries to remind you of things, maybe things that used to get on your nerves, things that you didn't like, he tries to remind you of how you're not where it is that you feel like you ought to be. He tries to remind you of what it is that you feel like you don't have. He tries to remind you of a situation of how it used to be to try to make you think that it is still that way. You know what you do? You praise and you worship God and you thank the Lord that that is not your portion. You see, when that started happening, and I recognized almost immediately, that's not what I think, that's not what I feel. I don't come into agreement with that. And so I started praying in my head to the Lord. And then I started singing out loud praises to God, because I recognized that that was the enemy trying to get me to think thoughts that were not mine. See, the battle is in our mind. The battlefield is the mind, just as the book says, the battlefield of the mind, right? And so when we recognize that it is the enemy that wants us to come into agreement with thoughts that are not our thoughts, with thoughts that are not of God's, then you take those thoughts captive and you bring them into the obedience of Christ. How do you do that? You come out of agreement with them. That's not my portion. That's not what I believe. That's not what God says. God says I'm the head and not the tail. God says I'm above and not beneath. God says I'm the lender and not the borrower. God says that favor is my portion for 1,000 generations to come for me and my family. God said that healing is our portion. God says that deliverance is our portion. God says that blessings are our portion. God says the promises of God are our portion. God says that the goodness of God we will see here in the land of the living. You speak those things that God has said as they are because they are coming through the leading of the Lord. And then you praise and worship God in advance. And that's what I did. I started singing praises to God. I sang blessed assurance. I sang victory is mine. I started singing every praise song that the Lord dropped in my spirit. And guess what? When you resist the enemy will flee, because he has no portion here. He has no stronghold here. He has no foothold here. So when the enemy comes in, prowling around, roaring like a lion, but not the lion, remember whose and who you are. Remember to take those thoughts captive and make them go into the obedience of Christ. And remember who you are in God. And thank the Lord that he inhabits the praises of his people, and praise the Lord in advance. So I pray that this has been a blessing and encouragement for someone today, because victory is your portion. And we have the blessed assurance of knowing that we are the Lord's and the Lord is ours. I pray this has been a blessing and encouragement for someone today. Y'all be blessed.